Thank you. During difficult times in life, we've all had moments of worrying and wondering how we're going to get through. But what happens when the overthinking starts to take over? That might be a sign of generalized anxiety disorder. With more on what that is and how to cope, psychologist Anne-Marie Mediwake is joining us this morning. Good morning to you.
Hi, Lindsey. Thanks for having me.
Let's break this down. What is generalized anxiety disorder?
Right. So thanks so much for having me on to talk about this, because generalized anxiety disorder is kind of a misnomer. And I blame the title, because people seem to think, oh, it means I have anxiety in general. But in essence, it's actually quite specific, and it involves excessive worry about a lot of things in your life, to the point where it's not allowing you to sleep. You know, it consumes you. You're not functioning well. And that's actually the difference between having a diagnosis and just having symptoms of it. If it's really starting to affect the way you function and your well-being, this is where it's categorized as a diagnosis. And oftentimes people say it comes from, at some point in your past, the rug maybe was kind of, swept up from under you, and there was trauma or a bad breakup or an illness where you were left to think that the world wasn't safe. So you have these worries that things will go wrong.
So what are some of the characteristics of generalized anxiety?
So right at the top of the list, Lindsey, we're talking catastrophizing. So being preoccupied with the potential of a negative future, to the point where you're doing a lot of what-ifing. What if I fail the exam? What if I don't get the job? What if I get sick? And some people challenge me, Lindsey, and they say, well, Anne-Marie, I have to worry a little bit about the future, don't I? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. But if it's, consuming you, you're worrying a bit too much, and you're catastrophizing too much to the point where it's really going to affect your well-being. Secondly, fear of the unknown leads people with GAD to be very controlling. So they often get labeled as controlling first and foremost, when it's not that. It's that they're worried about the future. So for example, what if I don't get that job? What if I don't do well in the job interview? Well, you're essentially worrying to the point where you feel like you need to control the present. You're like, oh, I need to wear the proper outfit. I'm going to do it for 5 hours every day. I'm going to prepare. I'm going to plan. I'm going to clear out my schedule. You're trying to control the present for assurances, and we all know we can't have those kinds of assurances. And lastly, indecision. That's basically, what do I wear to this interview? Do I wear the blazer? Do I wear the sweater vest? I'm not sure, because they want to make the right decision to avoid that worst case scenario they're so worried about. So indecision is huge as well.
What are some strategies we can use to cope with overwhelming feelings of worry?
So the first one of the low-hanging fruit strategies I like to use is, please stop playing the horror movie version of the future. Right? People who have GAD go automatically to that worst case scenario, and they're playing that horror movie version. Listen, don't get me wrong, it exists, but to go there and to give all of your airtime there, is basically unfair. There's a plethora of other possibilities. So we get them to consider the other possibilities that exist, not just the catastrophe. What I think works better, though, is something called imaginal exposure, which is, you're scared of this worst case scenario. You're scared of not getting this job. Let's go there. Let's go to that future. And our goal is to make you more comfortable with that worst case scenario happening. Process those emotions. Don't be crippled by that possibility. So we kind of use imaginal exposure there. And lastly, something that I've incorporated in recent years is an empowerment strategy. Because what I've learned with people with GAD is they come to learn that not only do they not trust the environment, but they also don't trust themselves, and that they don't realize that when push comes to shove, and if a crisis or something catastrophic does in fact happen, they have more power and more resilience than they've come to believe. So I oftentimes go there in my treatments as well.
Speaking of treatments, somebody watching right now going, oh, I sort of recognize this in myself, or somebody in my family or close friend. When is it time to get help?
So it is about really understanding what your functioning level is at. So if you realize, hey, I'm really not sleeping anymore, and it's been 2 weeks or a month, and it's really not going well. I'm not functioning well at work. I'm not concentrating anymore. And I also identify that I'm worrying, right? A lot of people don't realize worrying is fine. Worrying is allowed. But if it's consuming you to the point where you're not functioning well, that's when please talk to your doctor about it, or please get a consultation with a therapist or a psychologist to see what's going on.
Anne-Marie Mediwake, great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsey.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.